Welcome, golf fans, pursuers of knowledge and the almighty dollar. This is your golf guru bringing you the Charles Schwab Challenge. This is my preview show with a focus on breaking down the course. Going to break down this player field. I got a ton of custom stat models for you. And also I'm going to give you my bets that I'm looking at. There's a few of them, but I know this course very well. I know this event very well. And with the hopes that this is not an elevated event, that, well, if we can get by Scotty Scheffler, we might have a long shot in the making. We'll also do a quick recap of the PGA, mostly focused on Brooks. And with all that said, thanks for stopping by, and let's go talk a little golf. All right, so I was just talking about the man, of course. Brooksy pulls it off with his third PGA victory, well, PGA Championship victory, I should say, to be clear. And, of course, his fifth major. So he puts it up there with some very esteemed company like Jack Nicklaus, of course, Tiger Woods. And what's kind of interesting was that, he had two previous wins, a PGA, of course, at the Bethpage in 2019, going back-to-back to defend his title. And that was in New York. And then, of course, he won the U.S. Open, defending his title again, 2018, 2019 at Shinnecock Hills, was also New York. So what it kind of told me was, I guess I should have probably thought about that a little more, because I did not pick him. And a lot of it, that was from a DFS perspective. I just didn't think he would be able to pull this off. His price tag was a lot higher than what we saw at the Masters. Of course, he showed us good form, had a chance to win the Masters this year. But it's really hard when you've watched Brooks in his whole career as close as I have, and then all of a sudden it's kind of like he gets hurt, goes to live, and he's kind of out of sight, out of mind. He pops up at the Masters, and you kind of think to yourself, well, okay, that's kind of a one-off, a little bit like a Phil Mickelson. And I mean, I'm not putting him in the same class. I know he's a better player, but if I really should have thought what this guy does very well, like what he did at Bethpage and Shinnecock, when the course is uber hard, which it was, and we didn't know how hard that course was going to play. We knew it was going to be difficult, but we had no idea, at least myself, that it was going to be that difficult. That, Brooksy was definitely probably a very good pick and also a good bet. Now, from a betting side, I don't remember off the top of my head, but I think he was less than 20-1, which, as you guys know, typically from a golfing perspective, I don't really put, money on those guys too often. But anyways, congrats to Brooks. It's pretty interesting. Of course, if you saw the Netflix show and you watch his episode, which I don't remember which one it is, but he has a specific episode that he talks quite a bit on. And it, all the kind of buzz in the golf industry today, we're going to get a little bit into about the Ryder Cup, is, would have Brooks, if he felt like he could seriously compete and was healthy, that he would have stayed with the PGA Tour. And I think a lot of us in the golf world that follow it very closely think so. I mean, he literally stated on Netflix that he didn't think he could compete with these guys anymore. And so then all of a sudden you have all this money offered to him. And, of course, it was kind of a no-brainer. Also, you got to remember, if you've been watching golf a long time, there's very few regular events that Brooks would get up for. He sometimes wouldn't even show up to practice or to do, some practice rounds on the course. The only event that I picked him in and he won was when he came back to defend his waste management. I believe that was, his last victory on the PGA Tour, which I think was around 2021, 2022, whatever it was. But other than that, I always kind of felt like it was very hard to predict what Brooks was going to show up if it was just a regular PGA event. Where I'm going with all this, in short, is that, the live kind of model fits him perfect, where he's got guaranteed money. He's only got to play a handful of those exhibitions. That's what I call them, which is like, 13, 14 events. And then he still gets to play in the majors. And it looks like that he's actually going to get to play in the Ryder Cup again. So with his second place at the Masters, and then now his win at the PGA Championship, he's vaulted up in the Ryder point standings above Xander and is number 2. And he's still got a PGA of America membership, which I believe that is in standing until sometime next year, early is what I've heard, that, under all the guidelines, he should make the team. And I think it takes it out of Zach Johnson's hands to be like, well, what do I do with this? No matter what kind of, talking is back and forth, should or should he not be able to play on the Ryder Cup? Under the guidelines that I see it, is that as long as you're in PGA of America good standing, who actually started the Ryder Cup way back in the 20s to grow the game of golf, and he meets everything else from a point standing, and he's in the top 6, there's no way that I would think he would not play. And then, of course, I got DJ there just because he would fall under the same thing. Of course, had a great showing. I believe won all his events, the 5 events that he played in singles and all his, the doubles, foursomes, and whatnot. And so somehow if he went and won the U.S. Open at in L.A., the L.A. Country Club, he could be also right there with Brooksy, and we could see those guys teamed up again. So just kind of interesting. That's all kind of the buzz right after Brooks won this, saying of, hey, what's gonna take place for the Ryder Cup. And of course, I think Brooks has always done a pretty good job of not really focusing on the live thing and just always kind of talks about him and golf and and all that kind of. He doesn't really pound home that. And then also you got to remember his younger brother Chase, who struggled mightily to try to ever get on the PGA Tour, was the first one to go over there from the Koepka family. Of course, DJ also went, in which it made total sense. I'm not 100, I don't know this for a fact, but Chase has never done really anything even on the live event. And I'm sure there was something in the contracts or the agreement that they would take Chase Koepka under this minimal 48-man kind of structure if Brooks also came over. And I'm sure he felt somewhat obligated to help out his younger brother because it wasn't looking like the PGA Tour was ever really going to work out for him. All right, there's all my thoughts on the Brooks topic. Then the last one, of course, the great, inspiring story, I believe, for all of us, especially at one time I was also a PGA Club pro a long time ago. And this Michael Block, who I think this was like his 5th time, who, tried out to make the PGA Championship, finally made it. And I think all of us that watched the tournament, it was like kind of a nice story the first day. And then all of a sudden, hey, the guy plays good again. He makes the cut, way above like the Roms and all the other guys that we thought would do pretty well at this event. He, I think, was even going into Sunday. And then had that hole-in-one on the final day on 15, just airmailed it, Dunk City, playing with Rory. And it was just cool. I mean, it was just an amazing story. I bet him early on to, top 10. Hopefully, he could do that. Of course, he slid a little bit outside of that. I believe he ended up actually around a T15. But what that did do is secure his entry into the PGA Championship next year. And then the reason why I'm also talking about him is because he did get a sponsor's invite to play in this upcoming weekend's Charles Schwab event. So, we got to figure out what to do with that. And, what I got to watch of him, the guy just was solid all around. His putter is what really kind of stood out to me. And I don't know if that was kind of a freakish, but the guy was making putts out of nowhere. He hit a great, pretty good long drive, and, you could use that run out. And so maybe all the worlds aligned because, he even mentioned, I think he hits like 1 bucket of balls a week or something like that. Of course, he still teaches, not a ton, he was stating. They'd only, does a few lessons. But yeah, pretty cool. I mean, he's played in other professional events, right? I mean, he kind of stated that he's been able to play enough golf that he doesn't have to, kind of grind it on the teaching front. Pretty cool story. And then, like I said, it'd be interesting. I'd like to see how this will work out for him from the Charles Schwab, because, it's a tough venue too, right? Typically somewhere around 10 under. We saw Kokrak, which we'll get into, shot like 15 under, but another very tough event, but he handled himself amazing, even in that rainy all-day Saturday event. So pretty cool. All right, just real quick, the last things, we'll go over stroke gain data, that the guys that ended up like top 10, where they ended up, if you want to see, how they did this. And of course, we look at Brooks, straight across the board. It's typical if you win an event, pretty rare you're going to be red and 1. It has happened, but, gained quite a bit off the field, off the tee, 6 strokes on approach. Was very steady with the putter. Really didn't get in a lot of trouble. I mean, it was on 6. He blew it into the water and still was able to get his bogey. What Brooks does well is not taking that double bogey. And I think if I remember correctly, he didn't make his first birdie until like his second day. It was just a ton of pars. And then finally, away the birdies started to go. Of course, everybody was kind of thinking Scotty Scheffler from the early onset, the way he was playing the first 2 rounds. Had a tough Saturday again. His 3rd round, which we have seen that here recently, but did make a nice little comeback again on Sunday. Of course, probably like a lot of us, not that I have really anything against Brooks, but I was really pulling for Victor Hovland again. Ends up in the final group in a major. And then, of course, that sand shot, I forgot what hole that was, 16, 17, that, he went to hit it out, it plugged, and that was pretty much the end of the tournament for him, as in winning it. Still had a really nice finish with a T2. DeChambeau was probably the most shocking to me. And again, this is almost a little bit like what Reed and Phil Mickelson did off the Live Tour on the Masters. maybe not as shocking because if you think about it, right, that is a course, the Augusta, that those guys have won on multiple times. They're very comfortable there. And it is a course that even if you're not in great form, it's shown before that you come back to a place that you've done well. You know the course very, very well, and that is an advantage. A couple call outs that I had. Hey, if you wanted to take a shot on Cam Davis, I thought it was, from a DFS perspective, was a good play. And so if you did that, it definitely worked out for you. Same with Kurt Kitayama. I mentioned his win at the Arnold Palmer, elevated event, very tough conditions, also elevated rough. I would say that was kind of my two pass, but I had a lot of guys that I picked that did not make the cut, and we can go talk about those guys too. And then kind of wrap this up. So, of course, Jason Day, it would have helped if I'd have known that I don't know if he was dealing with vertigo or any of the, back issues or whatever, but, he did not play one practice round, was kind of trying to save all his energy. And as we saw, that did not work out. The guy struggled everywhere, got a little around the green, but I mean, from a stroke game perspective, everything was telling us, of course, he was coming off a win, but nothing that I was like, oh, there's no way he can, they go do well at the PGA. It's not like typically a first-time winner you would be a little worried about, but was not worried about that with Jason Day. But I get the guy was just wore out. And this season, with all these elevated, designated events, has taken a toll on these guys. I did say, and it wasn't because of any stroke gain analysis or anything specifically that I could put my finger on, but I was just off on Ricky Fowler. Of course, he missed the cut by a stroke. And honestly, it's not that he played bad golf, because I got to see a bit of Ricky. He just could not make a putt. The guy just over and over couldn't make a putt. Of course, Gary Woodland was playing amazing from a stroke game, but we all know typically Gary will struggle with the putter, but also the irons left him. Wasn't Siwoo Kim was my pick, but I just brought him up because he is, of course, playing into Charles Schwab. But with Siwoo Kim, we always know, especially under these conditions, a lot of this you can kind of throw out the window. But at any time he could turn it on, but you can see around the green putting. Sam Burns, now that was a bit of a shocker, and I do believe I picked Sam Burns, if I remember correctly, but he just blew up really on the second round. I think he shot like 10 over, and you can see just lost everywhere, gained a tiny bit with the putter, but the irons and around the green, it looks like around the green is where he really struggled. But of course, he's our past champion, Charles Schwab, in the field, and I believe he's at 25-1, which, if you were thinking about betting Sam Burns, it's still not great odds. I think it's a pretty decent field we have. I don't know. It's always hard when I see these odd boards, but coming off that kind of round, you thought maybe you would get a little better. Of course, Fitzpatrick, I think it was another shocker, really struggled on Thursday, and I feel like he came back a little bit on Friday, but still missed a cut by a stroke, and the putter was letting him down and off the tee. Wyndham Clark was another one. A lot of people very high owned in the DFS market, was not a guy that I was picking. I think, he won that Wells Fargo, and I think everybody really jumped on the Wyndham Clark bandwagon. And I get it. I mean, he's got the distance, and that was a lot of things, but we're trying to figure out, and you could kind of see from the first couple of days of that event, it was more about guys that were hitting fairways. It wasn't so much about how long you could hit it, and that shows up here. Sungjae M, shocker, I think he shot maybe 10 over on the first day. Of course, I mentioned that, he was coming back from Korea with that win. So again, maybe that caught up to him. And then last but not least, Cameron Young, where, from a ball striking perspective, should have fit. And he still did pretty well, but man, has he been struggling with the putter. And again, I do not believe I picked Cameron Young, but I do know I picked, I think, M and Fitzy, like Burns and Day were some of my picks I just busted. Enough about the PGA Championship. It was a good one. I don't know, still, I'm kind of on the fence if I like the PGA playing more like a U.S. Open, because honestly, that was one of the toughest, events that I've seen in a while, way tougher than the Open we've seen for the last couple of years. So anyways, yeah, I don't know where I'm on that. I think it was maybe a little out of hand, if you want my personal opinion, especially knowing with the weather that was coming. I think they could have made it a little more playable, but hey, man, it fit right into Brooks' wheelhouse for what he does well. Oh, and then of course, I did not pick Jon Rahm, but he almost missed the cut, and same with Rory. I think they both made the cut like on the number, and so that was kind of crazy. Of course, Rahm never really gained it back. I think he ended up like 4 over, something like that. And then, of course, Rory did make a little bit of a charge over the weekend. Okay, time to switch gears and let's talk about the Charles Schwab Challenge. I am super excited about this. You guys know there's certain tournaments that I know very well that I look forward to, and especially with this not being an elevated event, that we don't have like a stock field that we have to worry about getting around. Really, I see like 2 guys that we have to get by. Of course, it's Scotty Scheffler, and then you got Jordan Spieth, who's played amazingly well here, but also he barely made the cut, and of course we know he's still dealing with a wrist issue and could possibly pull out of this. Of course, it is a local event for these Texans. And with that said, we're flying now back over to Texas and going to be playing in Fort Worth, which is around Plano, Texas, I guess a little north of Dallas. This course has been around forever, opened in 36. The tournament's been played here, maybe different names, but under Charles Schwab for quite a while that I remember, over 75 years. Of course, they did a big Gil Hans renovation. And then your architects was Perry Maxwell. It is another par 70, so not too far off what we just saw. And it's got pretty good yardage for a par 70, not as much as what we just saw at Oak Hill, but it is around 7,200 yards. And what's kind of unique, I think, from a Texas venue is not that the Bermuda fairway is a Bermuda rough, but then they changed to that A4 bent greens. So that, something to note out that it is typically when we go to Texas or the southern regions, you stick with Bermuda across the board. It is bent grass here. And what I did have from last year, because the superintendent sheet is, I believe, not out yet for this, rough is at 3 inches, which if that's 3-inch Bermuda rough, of course, makes it tough. What's also a little unique about this event is the player field is pretty small compared to what we've been seeing. There's only 120 players in this event, cut still at T65 and tie. So what does that mean? Pretty much 60 guys are going to get through and 60 guys are going to miss the cut. And your historical cut line in the past few years, somewhere between 100 to plus 3, depending how windy it is and how the course plays. And then, of course, last year, Sam Burns won this event at 9 under with that playoff with his, everybody states 1,000 times, his best buddy, Scotty Scheffler, which was pretty cool. And then before that, he had Jason Kokrak, which was wasn't shocking, but, I remember doing the analysis on this. And what's unique about Jason Kokrak before he went to live was he's such a big guy, and I think we always pictured him as fits a bomber's course. But funny enough, when I did the analysis, it showed that Jason Kokrak actually played the smaller tracks, the more strategic tracks better, hence like a RBC Heritage, or at Harbortown, or even the FedEx St. Jude for TPC Southwind. And that came to fruition. He shot 14 under. And then before that, of course, this was the first event played after the COVID shutdown. And Daniel Berger came out and won that at 15 under in a playoff with Morikawa, who missed a very simple 3-foot putt. Still, back then, was missing those short putts to win that event. All right, we got average size greens. I'd say maybe a little smaller than average at 55,000 square feet, which I always state the average are 5,500 square feet on tour. You got quite a bit of sand at 84 sand bunkers. You've got 4 water hazards that bring 6 holes into play that actually the water can affect. There's some, not island greens, but water around the green on some par 3s. Typically, these greens run very fast, around 12.5 with some slope, and that's showing what they ran at 12.5 in 2022. And I kind of talked about already the course defense. Pretty simple. It's an old-styled course, not too far off what we just watched at Oak Hill. And if the wind blows, which it is Texas, typically it does, that is a pretty big defense. Of course, it's a tree line course, and a lot like Harbortown, where if you actually, as I mentioned, I played there, and, you kind of go out and you say, well, the fairways aren't bad, but what's funny is you hit your shot, and then the way the trees have kind of grown in, that you're kind of blocked out on your approach, even though you're in the fairway. And so knowing where to land your drive on this course really comes into effect. So it is a strategic, if you want to say, plotter's course. The Bermuda rough is tough, as I kind of was stated. There's a bunch of dog legs. And of course, a lot like we just saw with the Green Mile or the Snake Pit or whatever it is. They've got the horrible horseshoe here, which is holes 3, 4, and 5. You got some very tough long par 3s, 3 of them that I think of off the top of my head that are playing about 175 to 200. And it's a shot maker's course, taking driving distance away. So that's why I like this event and some of the tighter courses, is because the guys like a Rahm or a Scotty Scheffler that have such elite distance with accuracy is a huge weapon on some certain events. Like I think of the Tournament of Champions where they play at Kapalua. Like those guys typically should do very well there because you can just bombs away. Where here, it's all about guys that hit it very accurate off the tee, know the course, and then amazing with their irons around the green and putting. And then one note that I'll make, and I'll touch on this on the scorecard, but of course, you're going to notice there is an advantage if you're playing Showdown. I'll talk about that. this is a horses for courses tournament. Kevin Na, of course, won this, I believe, back in 2018 or 19 now. Of course, he's on the Live Tour. But I always said there were certain courses where these guys could win. Hints like a Brennan Todd that, again, hit a ton of fairways, good with the irons, but really good around the green and putters. And, of course, Na shot a 61 back in 2018, which, again, is, I believe, still the course record at this track. All right, so I mentioned on the scorecard, nothing's changed as in distance or yardages. The one thing I will call out is that there is an advantage. If you're playing showdown, you're going to want to shoot guys off 10 because if you look here, the easiest holes, 1 and 2, and then, of course, you've got 17 and 18 that are 14 and 13. So you've got 4 holes that allow you to get that birdie streak bonus. So the birdie 3 holes in a row, you get an extra 5 points, which, again, if you play showdown quite a bit, is huge. You get, there's guys, if you just put that on the board, typically you're doing pretty well with all 6 of your players. So that's really the only thing I'll call out. Of course, there's that horrible horseshoe right here on 3, 4, and 5. You got a long par 4 almost at 500 yards, crazy long par 3 almost 250, and then another long par 4. So again, you're going to see that's where that yardage just comes in. Even the par 5, it's ranked 16th, but it's 635 yards. But of course, number 1 being the easiest hole, another par 5. And then, of course, here's the scorecard. If you want to just check my yardage, it is correct. Everything on here is spot on from this data that we have from past for course history. Okay, so it's kind of funny with this tournament, even though it's been played forever, when you go to you guys notice I do a lot of imagery or even like the course maps. For whatever reason, they don't shoot this course a whole lot, so I guess the press is not that huge in it. But here's a really quick course map, and I'm not going to go through it at all, but what I would call out is you just notice every hole, there's a bit of dog legs, a bend, and then, of course, the tree lined. You can really, that maybe is what this does well and illustrates. And then just a couple of visuals. Again, I mentioned you got some water protecting here. You got these overhanging trees in the fairway. So again, even though you could be in the fairway, if you're back here, this depending on your shot coming in, could cause an issue. Again, you can see a bit of the trees out here. But, from this image, it looks, like I said, pretty wide fairways. It just makes sure that you're in the right area. And then, of course, the bunkering to also protect. All right, so this is kind of looking at, from a stroke game perspective, what have the guys done that have been in the top 10 over the last few years. This is looking at last year, 2022. And so we look at Burnsy, pretty solid across. What really kind of sticks out again is the putter and approach. Kind of the same with Scotty, again, gained against the field. But you can see there's some guys here, so 3 reds, that they didn't really gain off the tee, but man, they really did it on approach and typically with the putter. And so that kind of highlights that. And if you, again, want to look at some names, if you're not familiar, who's done well, Davis Riley's only played here once. Scott Scollins is kind of unique, right? I mean, typically he's very good with distance off the tee, but you can see that was not what helped him. He just went nuts with the irons and good with the putter. Back in the day, Mito Pereira. What's kind of funny is this kind of replicated what happened at Harbortown the previous year, where some of the ball strikers, we were always, as I mentioned, the Kevin Nas, the Brennan Todds. That's where we kind of always tend to look at the Charles Schwab. But also, you can see some very good ball strikers did well here, like the Cam Davises. Davis Riley would be a good one, even though typically he's not the greatest with the putter. And then, like I mentioned, the previous, with Jason Kokrak one, you can see did gain quite a bit off the tee, but good with the irons, good with the putter. Spieth, funny enough, did it a lot with the putter, which, that hasn't been that big of a weapon. My buddy, my Brokeback pick, and yes, I am going to bet him here. I have to. It's definitely a FOMO bet. You can see he did a lot with the irons, bit with the putter. The Hofster out of nowhere kind of show up, but I mentioned that can happen in Texas. Ian Poulter, that was kind of unique, but we don't have to worry about him. I believe Munoz came out and shot, I don't know if it was here, but I thought this could have been where he had that really crazy opening round, but he just went nuts with the putter. Again, you'll see Brennan Todd showing up, my buddy Grillo. I'm always excited about here. You're going to notice him on my cover. So a little shout out to Emiliano Grillo, hoping that he's had pretty good form. And if these irons, and he has been gaining with the putter, work out, maybe he could hit for us. Lucas Glover, who is on also one of my comp courses, which is TPC Deer Run, where they played a John Deere Classic. He is a good ball striker, but actually, which is unique. And like he did at the John Deere, on the bent greens, he did gain 4 strokes. And then Brian Harmon, who, if you go look at his record in the fall, so like back when they were playing a lot of these kind of courses, actually shot very well. Didn't get a win, but man, he was up there top 10 over and over. Is also someone that's kind of fallen a little bit out of sight, out of mind, which I do believe he made the cut at the PGA Championship. All right, last but not least, again, Daniel Berger for me is always, again, this was the first event that came out of COVID. I think is just like the prototypical guy that I think of for this course. Not super long, but very accurate off the tee. Really good iron player and a pretty steady putter. Especially, funny enough, on Bermuda, I always thought of Berger, but you can see here on the bend he gained in. Really, that's the two things. So if I had to pick only one stroke gain category, it'd be approach. If I had to pick my next one, it'd be putting, and then the next one would be not so much distance, but good drives, and that flushes out over and over. And like I said, I mentioned, I know this course very well. And so with that said, this is what I'm going to. So technically, that's supposed to say player profile, but really there wasn't a lot of changes to it. So I just pretty much pulled this in from last year. I did add scrambling at 5% because if you do get a little wayward, in these trees, you're going to need to get out. But that is really it. And so approach is king here. It's a second shot course. Ball striking shows up. Good drives. What is that? If you don't know, that's guys that's not so much worried about distance at all. It's about who hits the fairways or the first cut of intermediate roughs, like the first cut, I guess simplest way to put it, and then actually hits the green on their next shot. Putting, scrambling, and then there's two procs to the pins that show up here over and over. You got this 125 to 150 at 21%, and then 150 to 175 at 25%. I mentioned there's 4 par 3s, I'm pretty sure off the top of my head, but there's 3 that play this 175 plus 200, some long ones, a ton of par 4s that fall in between this 4 to 450, so I threw that in. And then we're looking again, not for guys that, it's going to make a ton of birdies, but give them the opportunities. We want those guys. Because again, this is not a birdie fest. Typically, I would say, depending on the weather, it's going to be somewhere around 10 under who's going to win this thing. All right, so with all that said, that gets me to what I built for a custom stat model. And this is going to be looking at recent form. And if you're curious about the weightings, you can see it here real quick. I'll go over it. Approach at 25, ball striking at 20, good drives are at 15%. Those 2 proximities to the pin at 5. I up putting from last year to 10. Those par 3s at 5, those par 4s at 5, and then birdie or better opportunities at 5, scrambling at 5. So that's where I kind of fell on my larger custom stat model. And I am looking at the last 6 tournaments they played. This is pulling in PGA Championship data, so it is updated. And also no filters turned on or 24 rounds, however you want to look at it. And with that said, no shocker, Scottie Scheffler comes up number 1. Of course, you also got Victor Hovland in the field coming in number 2. You got Fleetwood, who's been playing great golf, did make the cut at the PGA Championship. Didn't do anything amazing, but, is someone, again, we're still looking for that first win on U.S. soil. Ricky Fowler's back in the field at 28 to 1. You got Seabez, who I'm very excited about. I'm not usually too pumped about Christian Bezuidenhout, but this is a spot that I think he could win. Of course, also, he's looking for his first victory on U.S. soil. You got Morikawa, Jordan Spieth, Justin Rose, Emiliano Grillo, Chez Reavie, one of my picks also that I had last week. And actually, I was having a good Sunday. It was like 3 under and then kind of fell apart a little bit. I think he ended up around T20, somewhere around there. But again, for I think he was almost min price. So he was a great play from that side. Cage Lee, Seb Straka, Danny McCarthy, Stefan Jaeger, and then Akshay Bhatia to round out the top 15 guys that are under recent form, which is the last 6 tournaments they played against my model, doing very well. And then I also I call this the recent form. So even looking back 6 tournaments, guys can definitely fluctuate. So this is looking at just the last 3 tournaments or 12 rounds, and not a ton changed. But you got Scottie Scheffler, Fleetwood goes to number 2. Grillo, my buddy, moves into 3. Hovland, Seabez, Hayden Buckley, who also I believe did make the weekend at the PGA Championship, was also another call out and pick of mine that was in the 6,000 range. Cage Lee, Jordan Spieth, Ricky Fowler, Nate Lashley, Joseph Bramlett, a little bit more known for his distance, but a great ball striker, just need him to putt. Carson Young's been playing pretty good golf. He's up there. Austin Eckroat, who had a great showing. I'm going to blank. Maybe it was Wells Fargo, where he had a chance to win that, I believe. Also out of Oklahoma State, so a rookie this year. And then Chez Reavie and Matthew Neesmith. Again, Reavie pops up, and I think is a great play at this event. All right, with that said, now let's go look at who's had the best history at this venue. And this is looking at the last 24 rounds or 6 tournaments played here. And then I also did one for the last 3 tournaments, so get a little more recent form with history. And number one comes up my buddy Emiliano Grillo. Yes, of course, I am betting him I believe I got him at 90 to 1. Just side note. Colin Morikawa, Brian Harman. I mentioned, again, you guys, that just go look at what he did in the fall. This course fits him. You got Russell Knox, which is a good long shot bet. Justin Rose, Seabez, Tony Finau, Davis Riley. Now, note to self, Seabez only has 6 rounds here, so he missed a cut here once before. And then Davis Riley's only played once here. Victor Hovland, this looks like it'll be his 3rd time in this event. So only 8 rounds. You got Andrew Putnam, Jordan Spieth, Scotty Scheffler. Also, if I do the math right, he missed the cut here at one time because he only got 10 rounds here. Harris English, Ches Reavie, and then Adam Long, my buddy, with 14. Also kind of makes sense. He's a good kind of solid plotter. And then if you want to just pull up the last, a little more recent, so this is looking at the last 12 rounds on this event. Morikawa's number 1, Seabez, Victor Hovland, Davis Riley, Finau, Grillo, Scheffler, Adam Long, Rose, McNeely, Andrew Putnam, Knox, Sungjae M, which kind of makes sense, Jordan Spieth, and my buddy, the Canadian Adam Svensson, who was also a pick of mine for the PGA Championship, was doing really well, but just kind of fell apart on Sunday. And I don't know if he got hurt. I have not looked into this yet, but he looks like he is pulled out of this tournament, which is a bummer, right? Because he got his first win at the RSM, which is a great comp course, and everything that he does is a perfect fit player for winning this event. And that is, you hit a ton of fairways, awesome with the irons, and he's actually been putting very well for Adam Svensson over the last few tournaments. So was kind of bummed to see that. I would have been all in on him on a betting perspective. All right, then another view. Almost call this my one and done view, because what this does is gives you the past 5 years at this event, who's gained the most strokes, total. And funny enough, Jordan Spieth pops up number 1 with that. Again, a good finish in 2021, but he's had all top 10 finishes over the last 4 years. You got Tony Finau, who's played very well here. Justin Rose got a pretty good history, won back in 2018. Next would be Grillo. He had a T8 in 2021, had a 3rd back in 2018, a T19 in 2019, which is pretty good. I mean, he missed the cut, Grillo, back in 2020, but other than that, and that was, you got to remember, that was a stock. That was like a major championship or an elevated event because everybody was coming off COVID and everybody wanted to play golf. Next, Morikawa, Harman, Sabatini, which that's kind of interesting. He could be a sneaky play. Putnam, Todd, Sungjae M, Hovland, Russell Knox, Davis Riley. Again, remember that's only one time playing this event. And then my buddy Adam Long, who I always tell you guys, if it's the vacation swing, which is like Corrales, Puerto Rico, the Mayakoba, anything in an island, Adam Long is not a bad play. Okay, now probably the number one thing that I think, as I mentioned, that you want to look at is who's the best with the irons. You need other things, but I mean, if I only could pick one stroke gain, it would be approach. And so looking over the past 6 tournaments, 24 rounds, only looking at approach, who's been the best. And again, I always tell you guys, if you're building DFS lineups and you want to say, okay, I want to build the best iron team, well, here you go. Scotty Scheffler, Morikawa, Hovland, Finau, Seabez, Batia, Fowler, Spieth, Straka, Fleetwood, Grillo, Nate Lashley, EVR, my buddy, Andrew Putnam, and then David Lingermuth, the Swede that's been playing better golf. And again, that's just looking at approach for the last 6 tournaments. And then what I actually did is, I used to do this a little different, but I thought this is the best way to look at this. So I used to just go by actually one prox at a time, the key ones, but I thought, you know what, that doesn't make a lot of sense because let's look at this holistically. So what I'm looking at is who's best on approach, but also really heavily weighting that 125 to 150 and that 150 to 175. So approach is at 35%, that proximity of 125 to 150, which was a little less, hence why I put a little less weighted at 30, and then I put 35% weight at the 150, 175. So this really gives you who's the best iron player for this course, is how I look at it. And with that said, the number 1 comes up Victor Hovland. Again, looking at the last 6 tournaments, 24 rounds. Jordan Spieth, Seabez up there again, Scotty Scheffler, Seb Straka, who, if you look at what that guy did from a stroke gain perspective at the PGA Championship, should have won that tournament if he could have just gained, a stroke or 2 with the putter. I think he had a really good, if I remember right, Thursday and Sunday, but struggled with the putting on the other 2 days, which what held him back. Honestly, I don't even remember what he finished, but the guy literally just crushed it tee to green. Akshay Bhatia, Fleetwood, EVR, Homa, Colin Morikawa, Rose, Aaron Rai, Fowler, Martin, and Alexander Noren. Max Homa, his game has fallen. I mean, I kind of talked about this. I wasn't really on him. I think maybe at the end I did go with him, but I kind of was like, hey, I think I'm just going to really stick with this guy in California. But I think it's more than that. I think his driver, was a little unique, was just not fading. It just kept hooking, which typically Max hits it down the left side. It hits that butter fade back, and he just struggled with that. Now on that course, as you saw, if you got wayward at Oak Hill, you were in big trouble. All right. Anyways, that gives you a list of guys that have been doing very well with the irons over the past 6 tournaments, 24 rounds, specifically under those proximities. All right, now the question is, hey, who hits a ton of fairways? Not so much worried about distance. Scotty Scheffler is still number one, which was why it makes him so deadly. Denny McCarthy, which, we've been kind of waiting for his first win, also fits and clicks a lot of the boxes. Harris English, who I believe was one of my picks and kind of fell apart, did not make the cut at the PGA Championship. Of course, Russ Henley, this screams Russ Henley. And yes, I've already bet him, so, we'll go into that. But he, again, is a prototypical player. Hits it 285, 290, hits a fairway every time. Really good with the irons. It's what he's going to do with that putter is going to change. Hayden Buckley pops up there. Victor Hovland, Matthew Neesmith, Colin Morikawa, K.H. Lee, Tyler Duncan, Ches Reavie again, Brian Harmon, Seb Straka, Cody Gribble. That's kind of interesting. And then Ryan Palmer, which I always state this, he is a member at this course, has been playing good golf as of very recently. Last couple events to Wells Fargo. And I believe, I don't even know what he did in the PGA Championship. He haven't played it, but he has showed up the last couple times. But I've tried the Ryan Palmer multiple times. I believe, still does not have a win in Texas. And as I mentioned, he's a member at this course, but has at times struggled at this event. Again, could be a lot of different reasons, but you would think, hey, home course, playing pretty good golf. Let's see what Palmer can do this upcoming weekend. And then, I grabbed this knowing that this tournament was coming up. I think this came out, maybe it was at the Wells Fargo at Quail Hollow. And I was like, you know what? Let's pull this thing. But funny enough, I think Tom Kim is not in the field. But of course, Russ Henley. So this is looking at kind of what I was just talking about. Who's the best, most accurate driver of the golf ball. It is not worried about distance, just hitting fairways. My buddy Russ Henley, number one. Morikawa shows up there. And of course, if he putts, he also, I haven't talked about him for this tournament. He is a perfect fit for this event. It's just his short game has been pretty bad. I do believe he made the cut and did okay. I think he ended up like T20-ish at the PGA Championship. I'm kind of shocked Satoshi Kodaira or Ryan Moore, but you got to remember, this is a pretty minimal field, right? If it was 156, these guys would probably be in, but because it is 120, Kodaira and Ryan Moore are not in the field as of yet. Maybe the alternates of guys drop out, and I'm curious if some of the bigger names might pull out, like I mentioned Jordan Spieth, but maybe his wrist is not as bad as we thought. I don't know. And then another thing to go look at, as I mentioned, you got to be a really good putter, as my buddy here, Kevin Na, showed. I believe that was 2018 when he won. So Brendan Todd, I am super excited about. I mean, again, been playing good golf, and everything fits a Brendan Todd kind of course and possible win. So this is looking at guys on bent greens over the past 24 rounds. They played on bent, so you got to remember, we don't see a lot of bent. Really, I think the last would have been Quail, Wells Fargo, and of course the Masters. But anyways, number one, Brendan Todd, Seabass, Justin Lauer, Andrew Putnam, Matt McNeely. Well, and of course the PGA Championship was also bent greens that we just played. So just side note. Justin Rose, my buddy Svensson, who's not in the tournament, note to self. Burns, Hovland, Homa, McCarthy, Justin Suh, Colin Tarrant, Dylan Fratelli, which that is interesting. Of course, he lives in the Austin area, but he has been playing really bad golf. And then Patrick Rogers at the end, who I've been kind of waiting on. I've been betting a lot. I've not bet on him for this tournament. I don't know. I just think that he fits a little more elite where you need a little more distance. But great ball striker, and it's showing that he has been putting on bent over at least the last 6 tournaments he's played on it. So, side note, someone that you might want to look at. All right, so for the comparable courses, I think I always tell you guys I kind of rank when I do this. I think what I'm doing from a comparable courses side is amazing for this event. Whenever you get in these very strategic, tight plotter kind of courses, they all kind of fit together, and guys over and over typically show up at these events. And so what we're looking at the first is the bent green ones that, are par 70s, they're tight tracks. They have some up and down slope, and at this event, if I remember right, there is a bit of elevation up and down, a lot like what you see at the TPC Deer Run for the John Deere Classic and the Travelers, which would be TPC River Highlands, which is played I believe, are in the Connecticut region, more of a northeastern course. But anyways, with that said, if you want to know who's done the best just on these 3 courses, I want to call that out. Number 1, Justin Rose, Russ Henley, Scott Stallings, Seabez, Morikawa, Duncan, Long. Also, note to self, look at how many rounds they've had. Like a Davis Riley kind of, kicks him out. I already mentioned Adam Svensson would be a great fit. But anyways, that's the guys, Griot, Reavie, Riley, Finau, Svensson, Streelman, and Henrik Norlander. If you're looking at just those 3 tracks over the last 24 rounds played on those events. And then what I wanted to do is then pull in a larger sample. And the only real difference, these courses over here are a perfect fit, but they're Bermuda greens. And that's the big difference here. But I think taking a bigger look is really the one that I would kind of go with if you are trying to build a lineup purely on just comp courses. And TPC Southwind, you got Harbour Town where they play RBC. Of course, they play the St. Jude at TPC Southwind, which typically kicks off the FedEx Cup. You got the RSM, which is Seaside, the Plantation course, and then you got the Sony Open for the Wailea Country Club. All strategic plotter courses that fit exactly what this is, but they're all Bermuda, and that's the big difference. And if you're curious who's the best on all of those, of course, Russ Henley had a chance to win the Sony Open, lost in that playoff to Hideki Matsuyama. You got JT Poston, who won the John Deere, and I think these 2 events play right by each other. Like, he had a shot to win, like, back-to-back, if I remember correct, last year. Sammy Burns, of course, won the Colonial. Trying to see if he's won any of these other ones. I don't think the St. Jude, but maybe, I think he lost to Abraham Ancer and Hideki Matsuyama in that FedEx St. Jude in a playoff. I think I remember that pretty clearly. Brian Harman, I told you, played a ton of these courses very well in the fall. Morikawa, who had a chance to win at the Charles Schwab, and is also trying to think if he's popped up anywhere else. Maybe, of course, the FedEx St. Jude. Got Scheffler, Buckley, Svensson again, who won the RSM just recently, but is out of here. Finau, which is kind of unique. I wouldn't think these courses would fit exactly, but Finau, like a Jason Kokrak, I think we always probably put him in that bomber camp, but honestly, he hits it, can tune it down and just hits a ton of fairways, and then pretty good short game. It's just the putter, depending on what that does. Victor Hamlin, Cam Davis, Colin Turin, who, if you're watching a bit of him, right, was right up there in the leaderboard, I believe, early on. I believe after day 1, if I want to remember that correctly, at the PGA Championship. Had a ton of birdies, but also just a ton of bogeys. My buddy EVR, this is a perfect fit for him. It's all what kind of he does with the putter is what's going to kind of dictate. And also the driver, we need him. But again, you don't need to hit it far. You just need to hit some 3-woods, hit a driving iron at this course. Neesmith and Seabez. And then if you're curious, I took a little bit larger sample against all these courses against my model. 9 tournaments, 36 rounds of golf. Henley's number 1, Morikawa against Svensson, right up there. I told you it kills me. He must be hurt because this is such a good fit for him. Victor Holland, Griot, Scheffler, Buckley, Reavie, Chris Kirk, I think it's a good play and bet. Of course, fits all those boxes. Of course, he just won the Honda, but has won the RSM a ton in his days. Seabez, Jordan Spieth, Colin Turin, JT Poston, EVR, and Joel Damon. Even though he's not won on any of these, he is also a perfect prototype. Hits a ton of fairways, hits, good with the irons, and it's all what happens with the putter for him. Okay, with that said, let's look at my betting card. And yes, it's a little nutty, but I get a little excited at these kind of tournaments. It's not an elevated or designated event, so I don't have to have him beat the top 50 players in the world. I just need him to beat a few of the top guys, and that's going to be, like I said, more, I think Scottie Scheffler is really going to dictate. If he somehow does not play well, I believe that opens up, even though you got the Spieth and the Homas, Morikawa. I don't think Morikawa's been playing that great, but if his putter flips here, watch out. But yeah, I feel like there's a path for these guys definitely to win this event. And of course, no shocker, Russ Henley. I bet him right off the bat. Griot, you can get him at 80-1. This is showing DraftKings Sportsbook odds. Check out PointsBet or go to Odds Checker. You can get better odds on some of the guys higher up than what you're seeing here. Ches Reavie, 300-1. Again, been playing good golf. Made the call. He hits that 200-yard shot. Hits a ton of fairways. Again, won the Barracuda, I believe, past summer, a year ago. Also, typically it's a putter with him, but he actually putted pretty well at the PGA Championship. Chris Kirk, perfect fit. Bet him. You can actually get him at 60-1. Seabez, you can get him at 80 to 90 to 1. EVR, you can find better than that, but 300 to 1 still pretty good. You got Ryan Palmer. Of course, I told you, I've been playing good golf recently. Now, this has failed on me before, but he is a member here, knows the course well. He's a Texan, all those things. But, I'll still play him. I'm going to play him in DFS. I like what I've been seeing recently, and hopefully we can get him over the hump and get a win in Texas. Russell Knox, Knox has been terrible. But everything is showing up for Russell Knox that he should do well at this event. But you can get him 500 to 1. Again, just a super long shot. Patty Kazire, I'll just tell you right off the bat, this is a fear of missing out. Now, he's had some decent outings and rounds, but nothing that would tell me that for sure Patty Kazire has a really good chance to win here. Probably maybe a better top 10, top 20 bet. But again, I've been waiting for this to hit now, forever. And so I just have to bet him here. Adam Long, I mentioned again, it's not a putting contest, as in it's not going to be a score fest. Somewhere around 10, best case 15 under. But if the winds blow, more towards the single digits. So that's where I think Adam Long could kind of shine. Sam Ryder's kind of fallen off a little bit with how well he was playing. But still, I know that the irons are there. He was putting amazing and hitting good drives. I mean, the guy was playing just really good golf early in the winter, back again, like the waste management. So hopefully that comes back. I believe you can get him almost 300 to 1 if you shop that around. Andrew Putnam, again, everything shows up. Remember, we were waiting for Putnam also in the fall to get a win. Tom Hoagie, I feel like he's kind of tailed off a little bit, but we all know he's just elite iron player. Brendan Todd, again, has showed up, and again, I think you can get him 80 to 1. Eric Cole, I think, is kind of interesting. You should be able to find him 100 to 1, right? He showed up at Honda. He was also some guy that I was interested in at the PGA Championship, and right, he showed up, 5 under, and then just fell apart when he had to come back in the morning to finish. I believe that would have been like Saturday morning, but Eric Cole ticks all the boxes, right? Even like a Chris Kirk, who had a chance to win the Honda. And then, of course, Stefan Jaeger. You could throw him right there with EVR. I mean, honestly, this is my feelings. If you're going to bet Stefan Jaeger at 60 to 1, 70 to 1, you should bet EVR because they are, I think, identical. Sometimes the most elite with their irons. Maybe Stefan Jaeger has been better with the driver, but he doesn't hit it long. He just hits more fairways than EVR. But if the putter clicks for either of those guys, I think they're almost identical, to me, players. All right, guys, that's it. I want to get this show out because typically I've been getting them out to like Tuesday for these kind of events, but I really feel like there's some help here to get some bets in before, the odds start to get bet down, maybe on some of those higher odd guys. As always, if you do me the honor, click that like button, share this with anybody else. If you've not subscribed, click that subscribe button, do me the honor. I'm almost at 2,000 subscribers, and that'd be awesome. I think I'm at, like 1,900. So if you are for some reason watching this and like how I do what I do, please click that subscribe. I typically put out 2 to 3 shows. It's all depending on the event and the time I have, but it is deep analysis like what you see, no BS, and I get kind of right to the point. And last but not least, follow me on Twitter where I typically tweet out some videos or anything that's funny, but really it's keeping an eye on withdrawals and any conditions I see. I'll tweet it out, try to get them up before the morning, or you guys typically will ask me questions on either YouTube comments and or Twitter, and I try to get back to you guys as soon as possible with my thoughts. Hopefully that they help. With all that said, hey, as you guys could probably hear, I am pretty super excited about the Charles Schwab Challenge. I'm just excited it's not an elevated event. I know that sounds kind of weird, but from a betting side, I think we've just been getting destroyed because of the elevated event. So it's nice to have a field where you got like 5 top guys that, all of them you can make a story, maybe except for Scheffler, that there's a good reason why there's other guys that could win. And again, with Scotty, he has missed a cut here before, as I showed. And who knows, maybe he's a little burnt out. So let's hope for a long shot again. All right, guys, take care. I will, of course, have my pick show out tomorrow. And then maybe before the lock show, we'll see. If I don't get my picks out to Wednesday, then I'll just do it all in one. So we'll see how that all kinds of works out. All right, guys, take care. Talk to you later.